Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be taking a look at some review from the first semester and some from your Algebra 1 experience as it pertains to three really important formulas. One of them is the slope formula, distance formula, and midpoint formula. So for this, you're going to need to take some notes and obviously have a calculator on hand. And these formulas should look familiar to you because we've talked about them before. We've used them before. And then, of course, you've seen them before in prior classes, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you need to make sure you have in your notes is the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is useful to find the middle point between two other points that are given to you. And by point, we literally mean an XY coordinate on a graph. Here's what that formula looks like. M, or the midpoint, equals the point you get when you take the x from the first coordinate plus the x from the second coordinate and divide it by 2, and then y from the first point, y from the second point divided by 2. So we're going to take these x's and y numbers, add them together, divide them in 2, and that's going to give me the midpoint between two given points. Let's look at an example here. 5, -2, and 6, 2. What's the midpoint? Okay, what is the midpoint in between those 2 points? So if we follow the formula, this is what it says. Midpoint equals, and then I'm going to set up a point here with a comma in between. X from the first point, which is a 5. Here's my x coordinate. Y, or x from the second point, which is a 6, divided by 2. Then comma, y from the first point, -2, plus y from the second point, the 2, divided by 2. So if we just use the formula and plug in the x's and y's, xy, xy, first point, second point, and now we can go ahead and simplify or calculate our final answer here. So the midpoint would be, let's go ahead and calculate this. What's 5 plus 6? 11. Divided by 2? 5.5. So 5.5. And then on the other side over here, what's -2 plus 2? 0. Divided by 2? It's still 0. So this point, 5.5 comma 0, x is 5.5, the y is 0, would be the point that's located halfway in between the two original points we were given. So this is the midpoint. All right, now let's take a look at another formula we use, the distance formula. The distance formula is used to find the distance or the length between 2 points. So rather than trying to find where the middle point is located, we just want to know how long the piece is or how long the segment is. And the distance formula was d equals, and then had a big square root like that. Remember that? X from the second point minus x from the first point squared plus quantity y from the second point minus y from the first point squared. So we're going to find the length of a segment now this time. So here's your example. You need to write in your notes. And remember, if we go ahead and think about these things in the same way as we did the last one, this is x, y, x, y, x from the first point and x from the second point, and so on. We're going to go ahead and set up the distance formula first. It has a big square root like this. Parenthesis starts with x from the second point, -5. Subtract x from the first point, 7. Close it up, squared, plus y from the second point, -10. A subtract sign, that's a part of the formula, okay? And then y from the first point, -6. Now notice the formula had a subtract sign and my y was a -6. Both of those signs need to be in here, okay? They both need to be represented. And now we can go ahead and simplify what we see here. What is -5, starting with the parentheses now, -5 minus 7 is -12. We have -12 in the parentheses squared, plus -10 subtract -6. Now's the time when you might say, hey, a subtracted negative, that's like adding here. -10 plus 6 is -4, still squared. So now we need to actually calculate these numbers. -12 squared is positive 144, and -4 squared is positive 16. Anytime you square a negative or positive value, you're always going to get a positive value. Okay, never negative squared numbers, squaring them will not ever give you a negative, okay? Be careful on that. Sometimes we type them in our calculator, we don't type them correctly, and then we end up looking like we're going to get a negative answer here, okay? So 144 plus 16 now is 160. So far I have the square root of 160, and I can break that apart using the square root of 16 and the square root of 10, because 16 times 10 is 160. And the square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 10 I'll just leave alone. So my distance answer is 4 square roots of 10. So the length between these 2 points would be 4 square roots of 10. Now, if you wanted to know approximately what decimal value that is, you can go ahead and type that in to kind of know approximately. That is approximately 12.6. But later on, when we get into trying to make sure that lengths are exactly the same, we want to be careful, because if we round, they might look like they're the same when they really aren't. Okay, so make sure that we can keep those answers in square root form. And last but not least, the slope formula is one that we've used. This is used to find how lines are slanted. It is our rise over our run. And this is mostly used to determine if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. To understand if two lines are going to cross, not cross, cross in a special way, make 90 degrees, that sort of thing. Okay, so our slope formula also has x's and y's in it. Okay, m equals change in y's over change in x's, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And for this, you have to be given two lines, and you're going to compare their slopes to try to decide if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So the slope formula says how are lines slanted. It doesn't give me a distance, but it says how are they slanted, okay? So let's try this first one, line 1. If I was going to do the slope formula or set up the slope formula for line 1, we'll go ahead and use the xy again. And it looks like our formula says use y from the second point minus the y from the first point. Again, notice it's a minus, a negative again. That's okay. X from the second point minus x from the first point. And now when we calculate this, negative 10 subtract negative 6 here, that is negative 4 over negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12. And if I simplify that, that's positive 1/3. Two negatives will divide there to make a positive, and the 12 over the 4 makes 1/3. So the slope between those 2 points is 1/3, positive 1/3. And then we would do the same thing for our second line here. X's and Y's again, Y from the second point minus Y from the first point, X from the second point minus X from the first point. And then we'll go ahead and subtract. 1 minus 0 is 1. 4 minus 1 is 3. Nice. They both have a slope of 1/3. Do you remember what that means? That means they're parallel because they're sloping exactly the same. That means they're never going to intersect. So I would say that these lines are parallel. Okay, so we've reviewed 3 big formulas that we're going to need as we move forward here with our 4-sided shapes, and we get into a little coordinate geometry. Thank you for taking good notes.